Good day, everyone. So today I'll be presenting on the topic professionalization of the interpreting practice in the South African context. The main paper for this PowerPoint is Pinar and Cornelius, 2015. Okay. So this is the agenda for today. Firstly, I'll just introduce the topic. Then I'll do a brief background and answer the biggest question on whose fault is it? Now that we hear the problems that we're facing in the country, I'll talk about the challenges in the legal interpreting space, the progress in legal interpreting, including DOJ, Department of Justice, church interpreting, introduction, talk about research done in church interpreting, present a few slides by Salpek. My apologies, Salpek, and then conclude. So, I'm sure we all know this man. We've seen his images in 2013 at the Nelson Mandela Memorial. He received international attention. He was the fake interpreter, Thompson. Now, the thing about interpreting is that people have this belief that a person who's bilingual is an interpreter, which is wrong. So, interpreting is not just being bilingual. It's also about understanding the theories of interpreting, understanding the code of ethics. It's just there's many things that are part and parcel of interpreting. The two different interpreting models, Gilles' efforts model and cognitive model of interpreting. Gilles' efforts model mentioned that listening, production, memory, and coordination happen simultaneously in the mind of the interpreter during simultaneous interpreting. The cognitive model of interpreting says that firstly, you recept, you listen and comprehend, then analyze and encode, then do the expression and evaluation. Then only thereafter, you can interpret the message in the target language. So interpreting is not just anyone who's bilingual come through and interpret. There's more to interpreting than just the language. So the paper, which is Pinar and Cornelius, mentions three main events. It talks about the Oscar Pistorius' case, which took place in 2014. It received a lot of attention. The Disability Summit, which happened in 2015 in KZN, was hosted by then Premier Senzo Mchunu, and the Nelson Mandela Memorial. They all received media attention and public attention, if I must say. One thing that can be noted, though, is there is an issue in legal interpreting in South Africa. What we saw in Oscar's case was a tip of the iceberg. A lot is happening under the surface. A lot is happening on the daily basis in the courtroom. Interpreters are not regulated in legal settings. The issue on the training of interpreters, the quality provided by the interpreters, it was evident at the Oscar Pistorius' case and Senzo Meyiwa trial. The requirements when they advertise court interpreter posts at the DOJ. I'll just talk about that on the next slide. Now, on the Nelson Mandela case memorial service, the paper mentions that the company that was procured to provide interpreter service was not even like a language service company. It was just a random company that was hired to provide the service. So we can blame government as they didn't do proper screening. They didn't double check whether this person has the right skills for this job, an international event. The President Disability Summit also hired a fake interpreter. They just said, oh, you are an interpreter, we trust you. They didn't do proper screening, which then later came back to bite them. The summit also highlights the issue with the procurement of language service. So for government, it's more of like a tick box exercise. Just oh, we provided an interpreter, it's fine, we're done. So to answer the question, whose fault is it? All these different cases are happening in the public eye, public scrutiny. Who do we blame? Legal interpreting, we blame government. DOJ is government. Recently, I saw a government gazette post for a court interpreter last month. This government gazette said that the requirements for this post were 3 months of work experience as an interpreter. They must have they must be fluent in indigenous language and English, and vice versa. They must have grade 12. That's it. And then in churches, also churches are culprits because anyone who's bilingual interprets in church. Government procurement processes, government screening processes, I won't even mention that because it was evident at the Nelson Mandela Memorial. And now we all know that South Africa is a multilingual country with 12 official languages. And the Constitution of South Africa mentions that everyone has a right to justice. This is mentioned in Chapter 2, Section 34. The thing that makes legal interpreting very unique is that legal interpreting can make or break a case. Innocent people can end up in jail due to the interpreter's mistake, interpreter fault. And also what is happening currently is an interpreter is hired, they are taken to 3 months, I think, of training in Pretoria at the College of DOJ, and you're good to go. You're ready, go to court, interpret. The poor working conditions for interpreters, there's also no collaboration between universities and DOJ because legal interpreting is very specialized. There should be maybe like one institution that offers just legal interpreting specialized qualification. Yes, I know that UNISA used to offer this, but because there was like a low turnout, they just had to discontinue. But I feel like we need it to come back again. Now, although I've just mentioned all these bad things happening at the DOJ, good things are also happening in the same department. The recent roping of interpreters by the minister, Mamloko Kubai, last year, October. In her speech, the minister mentioned that the roping of interpreters is going to assist in professionalizing the interpreting field. And she mentioned the importance of the access to justice in one's own language, which is in the Constitution, and mentioned that interpreters are important stakeholders in ensuring that this mandate is achieved. So this is the DOJ interpreters pledge. I think it is amazing because it mentions a lot of the things that are also in the interpreter code of ethics, like accuracy and impartiality, professional integrity, respect and empathy, cultural and linguistic sensitivity, commitment to continuous learning. It's amazing. And one thing that the minister said at this event was that interpreters can apply for continuous professional development because the department offers bursaries for them to further their studies if they're interested. And she encouraged them to take this opportunity. It's been there for a few years, I believe, but not many interpreters have taken up this offer. And she was just encouraging them to say, listen, you can improve your skill. The bursary is there. So it's a step in the right direction. Now, talking about church interpreting, this paper was written by Kutsia in 2018. Kutsia in this paper mentions that church interpreters are not professional interpreters. They're just bilingual individuals who are just interpreting. Now, interpreting is not just being bilingual. There's theories of interpreting, models of interpreting, the role of the interpreter. Now, tell me, how can someone fulfill a role if they don't understand what is expected of them? The code of ethics, there's many things that encompass interpreting. So this particular study was done in South Africa for church interpreters. It used Niska's pyramid for community interpreters as a lens. So it talks about four main things in Niska's pyramid. It talks about interpreter the advocate, interpreter the culture broker, interpreter the clarifier, interpreter the conduit. Now, these were the findings of the study. 4 respondents said interpreter is a conduit and clarifier. 1 said interpreter is the conduit, clarifier, and culture broker. 3 said interpreter is a spiritual conduit. 1 said interpreter is a conduit. Now, this is how these respondents defined the different terms. They said clarifier is someone who ensures that the user understands the message. Advocate is someone who sensitizes priests on how to use an interpreter. Obviously, this happens outside of the church service. The interpreter, the conduit, is the spirituality of the pastoral interpreter is important because for them to provide the service, they must be a believer themselves and be guided by the Holy Spirit, which is similar to what this interpreter, the spiritual conduit, says, which is the interpreter must be guided by the Holy Spirit for them to deliver the intent of the speaker. The next slide is going to talk about SALPEC. SALPEC is South African Language Practitioners Council. This council was formulated from the South African Language Practitioners Council Act of 2014. SALPEC Council consists of 8 to 12 members, all of them appointed by the district minister. Their mandate is to regulate and train language practitioners, provide and control accreditation and registration of language practitioners in the country, develop a framework for accreditation for different levels: novice, professional, expert, develop code of ethics for registered practitioners, create an enabling environment for job creation. We know that in South Africa, I'll say most language practitioner graduates are sitting at home because, especially for spoken languages, when I compare to signed language, some of my friends who are doing spoken languages struggle to find jobs or like work, freelance work in KZN. So they end up just opting for a full-time job. So hopefully that is going to change and also improve the provision and quality of services provided by language. Well, we know what happened with the Oscar Pistorius' case, with the Nelson Mandela Memorial, with the Senzo Meyiwa case. It's evident the improvement of the provision and quality of service provided by language practitioners is needed by the country. So this is the registration process for SALPEC for one to become a member. First, you need to submit your personal information, which is your full names, address, email, qualifications, contact number, and references for those who are applying from the prior learning side, and the accreditation that you're applying for, accreditation level you're applying for. After doing this, then the council is going to forward you the application number to the person who's applying. And once the person has been registered, they have paid accreditation fees and complied with the quality assurance then they'll be given accreditation certificate for them to practice. So these are the different accreditation categories and subcategories within SALPEC. So the different categories are interpreters, translators, editors, terminologists, and many more. The subcategories within these categories are level 1, which is paraprofessional, language practitioners. Those are those who don't have qualifications. Those are just practicing in the community, churches, hospitals, clinics, etc. Level 2 is professional language practitioners, those who are fully competent in their field, have a degree, postgrad degree, or if they don't have a degree, must have prior learning and experience. Level 3 is expert language practitioners. Those are the ones who can handle complex and technical assignments. This particular person must have a degree or postgraduate. If they don't, have recognized prior learning with wealth of experience in their respective field. Now, we have discussed the problems, the issues in South Africa in terms of the regulation of language practitioners. We have seen the issues. We know what happened at the Nelson Mandela Memorial Senzo Meyiwa case and Oscar Pistorius' case. The issue on the vetting of language practitioners by government. Yes. However, having said that, we have issues, but there's also great policies in place. The SALPEC Act is another very important act that is going to change the way interpreters are perceived in the country. And what is happening at the DOJ, the pledge, interpreters pledge, and the minister encouraging interpreters to take up continuous professional development and apply for the bursary and get the bursary and further their studies to step in the right direction. Although there's problems, but there's also positive developments that are happening in the country in terms of this. So these are my references. And that is the end of my presentation. Ngiyabonga.